Listen to me carefully, because what I am about to tell you is not just about politics, not just about strategy, not just about nations making deals. No, it is about survival, it is about strength, it is about the future of the world. You want to understand why the United States does not want to lose India as an ally. Then you have to think bigger, you have to look beyond the surface, you have to see the muscles behind the movement, the power beneath the handshake. You cannot understand this by looking at numbers on a chart, or reading headlines, or listening to shallow commentary. No, you need to understand it the way you understand why a body must have a strong heart, why a fighter must protect his core, why a soldier never leaves his comrade on the battlefield. That is what India is to the United States. The world today is not the same as it was 20, 30, 50 years ago. Back then, the United States was standing on top of the mountain, alone, unchallenged, unstoppable. But look around now. The mountain has grown crowded. There are other climbers, pushing, pulling, trying to reach the top. China, with its endless factories and its hunger for power. Russia, with its military strength and bold moves. Europe, with its unity and wealth. Even smaller nations are rising, finding their voices, demanding their space. The world is no longer unipolar, it is becoming multipolar, like a gym full of new champions, each one training hard, each one fighting for recognition. In this world, the United States knows it cannot stand alone. It needs partners, it needs allies, it needs friends who bring real weight, not just empty words. And among all possible allies, India is the one it cannot afford to lose. Why? Because India is not just another country. India is a force of nature. Look at the numbers, look at the people. 4 billion strong, a population of unstoppable energy, hungry for growth, hungry for progress, hungry for respect. When you have that kind of power, it is like standing in a gym with 1,000 warriors, all training at the same time, all building muscle, all building endurance. That is not something you ignore. That is not something you underestimate. That is raw strength, and raw strength must be respected. But it is not only the size of India's population. It is the brain power, the innovation, the technology, the engineers, the scientists, the doctors, the entrepreneurs. The people who move to Silicon Valley and transform companies, the people who stay in Bangalore and build the future of software, the people who stand in labs and create breakthroughs in medicine, in space, in energy. India is a powerhouse of intelligence, and intelligence combined with numbers is unstoppable. It is like having both muscle and mind working together, precision and power. That is what India represents. And that is why the United States knows it cannot lose this alliance. Think about it. The U.S. has allies in Europe, yes, but Europe is aging, it is slow, it is cautious, it is careful. India is young. India is dynamic, India is bold, more than half the population is under 30, that means energy, that means risk-taking, that means courage to break barriers. If the United States loses India, it loses the fire of youth, the drive of ambition, the engine of growth. And in a world where everyone is competing to be stronger, faster, more advanced, losing that is like a bodybuilder deciding to stop training legs. You cannot do it. You cannot ignore the foundation. But there is more. Geography, look at the map. India is not just in Asia. India is at the crossroads of the world, between the Middle East, between Southeast Asia, close to the Indian Ocean, with eyes on the Pacific. Whoever stands with India stands in the center of global trade routes, energy supplies, military choke points. This is like standing at the very heart of a battlefield, where every path crosses, where every move matters. The U.S. knows this. It knows that if India stands with it, the balance of power in Asia shifts in its favor. But if India walks away, if India turns to another side, if India joins hands with rivals, then the United States is exposed, vulnerable, surrounded. That is why it cannot lose India. Now think about military power. India is not just building an economy, it is building an army, a navy, an air force that is modern, disciplined, and determined. India is testing missiles, building submarines, flying advanced jets, sending satellites into orbit. This is not a weak partner. This is a partner that can fight, a partner that can defend, a partner that can stand shoulder to shoulder in the toughest battles. For the United States, that matters, because it knows that alliances are not built on charity, they are built on strength. You don't want a weak partner who depends on you for everything. You want a strong partner who brings something to the table, and India brings plenty. But let me tell you something even more important. Values, democracy, freedom, rule of law, these are not just words. They are the foundation of the American identity. And among the rising powers of the world, India is the only one that shares this foundation. China does not, Russia does not, many others do not, but India does. The United States sees in India a mirror of its own journey, a nation that fought for independence, that chose democracy, that believes in the power of the people. This is not just convenient, it is powerful. It means the alliance is not only about strategy, it is about spirit. And when spirit aligns with strategy, you get an unstoppable bond. Of course, there are differences. Of course, there are arguments, trade disputes, tariffs, policies, but those are like small injuries in a long training session. You don't stop the workout because of a scratch. You don't quit the gym because your muscles ache. No, you push through, you heal, you come back stronger. That is how alliances work. And the United States knows that losing India would not just be losing a partner, it would be losing the future. So every time there is tension, every time there is disagreement, every time there is friction, the United States must ask itself one question: can we afford to lose India? And the answer every single time is no. Because if India goes the other way, if India joins hands with China, if India deepens ties with Russia, if India decides to stand on its own completely detached from the West, then the balance of the world shifts. Suddenly, the U.S. is not the leader of a global coalition, but just one power among many, struggling to keep influence, struggling to stay relevant. That is the nightmare scenario, and that is why the United States will do everything to keep India close. Remember, this is not about charity, this is not about weakness, this is about necessity, this is about survival. The United States cannot lead the world alone anymore. It needs allies, and among those allies, India is not just important, it is essential. It is the difference between leading the world and losing the world. It is the difference between standing strong and falling weak. So when you ask me why the U.S. doesn't want to lose India's alliance, I tell you, because India is the muscle, the brain, the heart, and the soul of the future. And without it, the United States is incomplete. When we talk about the future of the world, when we talk about balance, when we talk about strength, we cannot ignore one simple truth: alliances shape the destiny of nations. And in today's world, one of the most critical alliances is the one between the United States and India. It is not just about friendship, it is not just about economics, it is not just about military cooperation. It is about the entire foundation of global power, and if that foundation begins to crack, if India shifts toward rival powers, the cost is not small, it is monumental, it is transformational, it is the kind of cost that rewrites the story of the century. Imagine the battlefield of global geopolitics. On one side, you have the United States and its allies, nations that built the post-war order, nations that invested in institutions, nations that created the framework for international trade, for diplomacy, for security. On the other side, you have rising powers, challengers, competitors who do not accept the status quo, who want to rewrite the rules, who want to reshape the order in their image. And right in the middle of this battlefield stands India. If India remains aligned with the United States, the balance holds, the competition remains in check, the stability remains possible. But if India shifts, if India tilts toward the rivals, then everything changes. Think about what that would mean. Think about China. Right now, the United States looks at China as its primary competitor, a nation with a massive economy, growing military, expanding influence. But China is not invincible, it is not unbeatable, because there is a counterweight in Asia. That counterweight is India. India's presence keeps China in check. India's rise balances China's dominance. India's partnership gives the U.S. leverage in the Indo-Pacific. But if India shifts toward China, if India and China set aside their rivalries and stand together, then the entire equation flips. Suddenly, the U.S. is no longer containing China. It is facing a united Asian giant, a population of almost 3 billion people combined, a force of economic and military strength that dwarfs anything the West can bring. That is the cost. That is the nightmare. Now look at Russia. For decades, Russia has been a rival, a challenger, sometimes a threat. Today, Russia seeks new partners, new allies, especially as it faces pressure from the West. If India tilts toward Russia, then Moscow gains not just an ally, but a lifeline. Trade, technology, energy, military cooperation. India has already bought weapons from Russia. It has already engaged in deals. But imagine if that goes further. Imagine if India fully aligns with Russia's vision. Then the United States faces an adversary empowered by one of the largest democracies in the world. That changes everything. It turns a contained rival into a global challenger, supported by a partner with legitimacy, with resources, with people, with global influence, and it does not stop there, because when India shifts, others follow. Nations in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, they watch closely. They see India as a leader of the global South, as a voice for developing nations, as a power that speaks for those who feel ignored by the West. If India moves toward rivals, then dozens of nations may follow its lead. They may turn away from Washington, away from Brussels, away from the Western Alliance, and toward Beijing, toward Moscow, toward alternative systems. The cost of losing India is not just losing one country, it is losing influence across entire regions, it is losing the hearts and minds of billions. Think about the economy. The United States and the West depend on global supply chains, on markets, on partnerships to keep growth alive. India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It is a hub of innovation, a hub of talent, a hub of production. If India aligns with the United States, those supply chains are secure. The flow of goods, of services, of ideas continues. But if India shifts, then supply chains begin to fracture. Technology begins to flow to rivals. Innovation is shared with competitors. The balance of trade tilts away from the West. The United States would not just lose a market, it would lose a driver of growth. It would lose a critical link in the chain of the global economy. That is the cost, and consider the military dimension. Right now, India participates in exercises, in cooperation, in shared strategies with the U.S. and its allies. This builds trust, this builds coordination, this builds strength. But if India moves away, if India starts training with rivals, buying more weapons from rivals, sharing intelligence with rivals, then the entire security structure of the Indo-Pacific begins to crumble. The U.S. Navy patrolling the Indian Ocean becomes less effective, the alliances like the Quad begin to weaken, the presence of the West in Asia becomes less meaningful. That opens the door for rivals to dominate sea lanes, to control trade, to intimidate smaller nations. That is the military cost of India shifting sides. But beyond military, beyond economy, beyond geography, there is something deeper, something more fundamental, the moral cost. For decades, the United States has claimed to lead the free world, to stand as the champion of democracy. And India, as the world's largest democracy, has been proof that this vision is not just Western, not just European, not just American, but universal. If India moves away, if India aligns with authoritarian rivals, then the United States loses that moral anchor. It loses the ability to say that democracy is the path of the future. It loses the ability to show that freedom and strength can coexist. That moral cost is not measured in dollars, not measured in tanks, not measured in ships, but in the very legitimacy of leadership. The cost is not only external, it is internal as well. Within the United States, within its society, within its politics, the partnership with India is seen as a bridge, as a source of strength, as a community of millions of Indian Americans who contribute, who innovate, who lead in business, in medicine, in technology. If India turns away, if India joins hands with rivals, then even those bridges become weaker, even those ties become fragile. That loss of trust, that loss of connection, that loss of shared purpose, these are costs that cannot be repaired easily. And do not think for a second that rivals would not use this shift to their advantage. They would celebrate it, they would exploit it, they would shout it from the rooftops. They would say, look, even India has chosen our side, even India has rejected the West, even India has walked away. That symbolism would echo across continents. It would embolden rivals, it would demoralize allies, it would create a perception of weakness that is more dangerous than weakness itself. Because in geopolitics, perception often becomes reality. The cost of India shifting is not something that would happen quietly, slowly, invisibly. No, it would be loud, it would be dramatic, it would be undeniable. You would see it in trade routes, in military deployments, in diplomatic speeches, in voting patterns at the United Nations. Every action, every move, every headline would remind the world, the balance has shifted, the order has changed, the future has been rewritten, and the United States would find itself in a position it has not known for a long time. A position of reacting instead of leading, a position of defending instead of shaping, a position of compromise instead of dominance. That is the geopolitical cost of India shifting toward rival powers. It is the cost of losing not just an ally, but the balance of the world itself.